Good morning and welcome to our webinar, UK Water Sector, an update on the AMP7 spending cycle and the Green Recovery Investment Plans. My name is Luke Newcomb and I'm a market executive based out of Enterprise Ireland's London office. For those of you unfamiliar with Enterprise Ireland, we are the Irish development agency for trade and innovation, supporting over 5,000 companies to scale and grow internationally. We have over 40 offices across the globe, and in the UK, we have offices in London and in Manchester. Our sector specialists provide clients with market intelligence and knowledge from the UK, and we also work with UK-based companies to help them source their next innovation coming out of Ireland, as well as to help them build long-term partnerships with our clients. I'm working closely with my colleague Dara Cotter with our water and wastewater cluster of clients. So the cluster has been operational for over 5 years now and consists of over 70 companies with various capabilities now. So AMP7 began over a year ago now, and since then the sector and the world has undergone great change. This event will look at some of the key developments in the sector, including an update on AMP7, green recovery investment plans, and other topics such as innovation and net zero. So on screen, you should be able to see an agenda now. So firstly, we'll have Lila Horrocks, Director at LCH Executive, give us an update on AMP7 and where the sector is at the moment. Then Lila Thompson, who you've just heard from, Chief Executive of British Water, will give us a supply chain update and an update on the work of British Water's Supply Chain Task Force. Then Matt Lewis, Water Innovation Portfolio Manager at Severn Trent, will give the water company's perspective and an update on Severn Trent's technology and innovation activities. Finally, there'll be a panel discussion where Lee and Matt will be joined by Paul Gardner, Managing Director at Glanagua, and Mike Froom, BD Director at TE Tech Solutions, and they'll chat about some of the key topics in the sector at the moment, including net zero, green recovery investment, and capability within the sector. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the questions tab in the control panel on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll do our best to pass them on. Any questions we don't get to pass on, we'll try to pass them on to the speakers after the event. Just to note, you'll also receive a recording of the webinar following the event. So without further ado, I'll now pass on to our first speaker, Lee Horrocks. If you want to take the floor, Lee.
From my perspective here, I wear a couple of hats, having been a non-executive director of British Water in the past, and I am now the water sector strategic advisor to Enterprise Ireland. I'm just going to give you very quickly a view on procurement within the water sector from a contractor's perspective, and hopefully any questions that you have will come up at the end. I'll switch my camera off now and then ask Luke if he will move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So procurement in AMP7, what happened pre-COVID-19 that I guess we're all pretty familiar with now. Everyday lives are driven by it and our working lives are driven by it. Well, there were some key drivers for AMP7 driven by the regulator and the PLCs: customer satisfaction, efficiency, innovation, value for money and the environment, which we'll hear a bit more about later. The determinations were issued, some agreed, some questioned through the markets capital route, but all have now been finalised. Prior to COVID, most of the AMP7 delivery frameworks had been procured. That's Tier 1 infrastructure and non-infrastructure consultants and Tier 2s and process and equipment, and we will hear from a couple of the Tier 1s and Tier 2s later on. A lot of the AMP6 partners were rolled on because they had that facility within their contract at the beginning of AMP6, but a lot of procurement was added to it. And I think the interesting thing was the Tier 2s and the SMEs and equipment suppliers were given a much higher profile in AMP6 by the regulator and by the PLCs. Forward, Luke. And I think there's an overall message, and I've delivered this message a number of times to Enterprise Ireland clients, that at that point, pre-COVID-19, there probably wasn't enough capacity or capability in the sector to deliver AMP7, something we should all note. Next slide, thanks, Luke. So what happened during COVID-19? Well, all the water companies worked really hard to keep delivering. And it's important to note they're now back up to about 80% of pre-COVID delivery, and that's probably as high as it'll ever go because of the additional requirements that COVID, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, has put on the delivery in the sector. Procurement initiatives just continued via remote working. I think we've all learned that we can work just effectively remotely now as we could from the office. So here's some examples of the things that have happened during COVID. Thames Water awarded, £700 million worth of frameworks. Northumbrian Water announced their AMP7 partners at the beginning of this month. Scottish Water announced their SR21, which is a very similar process to AMP7, but runs for 7 years at the beginning of this month. Anglian Water had said that they're probably going to spend more in 2021 in one single year than they've ever spent before. And hopefully a lot of people of you guys will be aware that Northern Ireland's major project framework is launched now. And something interesting is that because of COVID, the government regulators and the Environment Agency wrote to all the PLCs to ask them to bring work forward, value for money work, to help the recovery of the country. And that's work from AMP7 and in effect work from AMP8. And the UK Water Partnership set up a capabilities directory so everybody could access what capabilities there were in the sector that could be used in water but could be used elsewhere. Next slide, please, Luke. And here's an important note. British Water and Enterprise Ireland member companies have secured work through those initiatives above. So even during COVID, we were still securing work. Next slide, thanks. So what's going to happen for the next 3 or 4 years and then into AMP7? The AMP7 programs have been updated, and we can all see that they're taking 5 years work now and try to put that into 4 or even 3. The companies are awarding more and more work, and some people in the sector think that it could be bordering on undeliverable in years 3 and 4 of AMP7. The PLCs and the contractors are going to take more risks, probably more risks than they've ever taken before. Why? Because they need to deliver more, they need to cut costs, save electricity. They absolutely have to improve the environment, looking to reduce carbon emissions. There's some really tough targets for 2030 that we'll hear a little bit more about later. Customer service has definitely gone up in AMP7 as a requirement. A lot of projects are MICA driven, so that tends to change the emphasis for where the procurement works. Innovation, almost top of the list of things that we need to do. Everybody has to learn. And again, promoting tier 2s and SMEs and equipment suppliers to move them up the value chain. We're going to hear from some tier 1 partners in the Q&A later, but we absolutely need additional capacity and capability and innovation into the sector to help deliver the frameworks that have already been awarded and some more that will be awarded. Next slide, thanks, Luke. So what are the routes to market for the people out there to think about? Obviously, you can talk directly to the water companies, particularly for a bigger tier 1 type organization. I'm not going to go through the details of how, but you will get these presentations later, so you can come back and refer to them. Tier 1 consultants, if you want to talk about specific projects. Probably the target for the most of people on this call is likely to be tier 1 and tier 2 contractors about specific projects. Talk to their project managers, talk to their commercial managers, just to see where you can get involved and you can bring your capability, your capacity and your innovation to the marketplace. How do you do it? Well, best to do it from a multifaceted approach. Have a growth plan and make it particular to what you're trying to bring to the table. Make sure you contact the companies direct and the consultants. And a really important thing, and I guess you would say, I would say that, wouldn't I? Use Enterprise Ireland and British Water members and contacts to help you in that entry to the market. It's British Water and Enterprise Ireland can bring lots and lots of benefits to you as businesses. And then finally use, next slide, Luke. If you use the support that actually Enterprise Ireland and British Water can bring to you, we work in what we think is a massive sector, but it is quite interesting that when I pull this slide together, I think most of the key players in the industry are on this one slide. So whilst it might look like a lot compared to some industries, it's actually not that many. There's plenty to go at, but there's actually quite a limited number of people that you would want to talk to. So use British Water and use Enterprise Island to help you to get in touch with these people. Next slide, Luke. And I wanted to finish on a really positive note. Personally, I am, and I hope that everybody else is, that happy and proud that we can work in this sector. It's proved in the past that it's recession proof, and it's actually just proven that it's COVID proof as well. So even in difficult times in this sector, you can continue to keep working, which from a running a business perspective is obviously really, really important. And through to the final slide. Thanks, Luke. My contact details are there. You'll see them through when we get the presentations are circulated. If anybody's got any questions, obviously ask them through the webinar or even contact me direct, and I'll do my best to answer for them. So I will now pass on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much again for allowing me to participate in today's event for Enterprise Island, and thank you to Lee for that thorough and excellent presentation on AMP7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the supply chain view, if you like, of AMP7, but also going to sort of start off with the overall landscape. So could I should I take myself off camera and then you can put up the full slide? That would work. Okay, so I'm just going to kick off with, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine, Lila.
Yeah, we can.
Excellent, right, thank you. So I'm going to just kick off with the fact that at British Water, we enable companies to grow their connections, to collaborate and to influence. So just to sort of kick off, British Water is a trade association. We are a business development organisation with 200 companies in membership. They range from manufacturers, suppliers, academic institutions, contractors, water companies, so companies right across the water and wastewater sector. We help them to grow their business in the UK. We help them to influence government policy and regulations and standards. And also what we do is we help our companies to grow their business overseas. So can I have the next slide, please? So I can't see the full slide for some reason. Ah, there you go. Right, so what I'm going to start with is looking at the overall opportunities in the landscape. So as Lee mentioned, in England and Wales, we've got AMP7, a 5-year package worth £51 billion. And then as Lee mentioned, you've got Scottish Water Strategic Review of Charges, which runs from 2021 to 27, and that's a £4.5 billion package of projects over the 6 years. And then you've got Northern Ireland's Water's price control from 21 to 27. And again, those projects are worth 1.7 billion. And then in July, Ofwat issued its final decisions on the green economic recovery plans. So Lee already mentioned that. So we had Severn, Trent, South Staffs, South West Water, Thames and United Utilities, and they put forward projects. And what Ofwat has allowed for is an investment of £793 million on top of their PR19 packages. And then along with these companies, there are 7 others in England who will also bring forward £1.9 billion worth of extra statutory environmental schemes into AMP7. So there's a lot of work, there are a lot of opportunities, and there are lots of projects. And as Lee mentioned, there are net zero targets. So England and Wales have committed to targets by 2030. Scotland's is 2040, I believe. So there's a lot of opportunities for companies to work in the water and wastewater sector. Next slide, please. So I'm going to focus on AMP7 because obviously that's the reason for my participation today. As Lee mentioned, there are key drivers around AMP7 and what Ofwat has stipulated in this diagram, which you can get access to on their website, is they want to spend more than £1 billion to help protect against flooding. They want to reduce pollution incidents by 30%, help customers cut water use by 13%, cut leakage by 16%. So there's lots of opportunities with regards to whatever you're doing in the water and wastewater sector. Next slide, please. So in terms of the supply chain, view then, What we want to see is water companies, supply chain companies, regulators, everybody involved in providing water and wastewater, serving customers in the environment, working much more closely together and collaborating. It's a fantastic sector to work in. As Lee has already said, COVID has shown that obviously the water sector is COVID secure. It's a critical asset, it has to be delivered. So it's a great sector to work in, and it's a great sector to serve customers and the environment. What we want to see is a resilient and sustainable supply chain. So in terms of what Lee was mentioning before, speaking to supply chain companies, we believe we have the capability to deliver the projects, but not necessarily the capacity. And that is because there's going to be a lot of projects coming through. A lot of people have left to work in other sectors, and there are other competing sectors that are fishing from the same recruitment pool, and therefore attracting people into their projects and workforce, which is causing some challenges around capacity within the supply chain. And that's something I'd like to explore a bit further in the Q&A session. What we'd also like to see is a greater visibility of project pipelines. So we know that the water companies have worked extremely hard in trying to talk to and communicate with their tier ones and tier twos, but also we find that some of the SMEs who sort of come a bit further down the sort of supply chain are finding it difficult to find out what projects are taking place and where their particular solutions and technologies might fit in terms of the project landscape. So that's something that we're trying to work with water companies to get greater visibility of projects. We also would love to see a greater output of statement of needs, which is outcomes focused and not outputs focused. So one of the things that we're talking to water companies about, and it's something that they widely acknowledge, is that they want to get better at putting out their statement of needs so that the supply chain can plan for future projects. There are also challenges around innovation expectations. So obviously we've got different innovation portals and tools out there. We've done an innovation map working closely with MWH Treatment and others, and it's available on our website for members. And what it does is it goes through the innovation journey that a company would go on to find how they can engage with water companies in terms of innovation. Now, obviously the key thing is that water companies have their own innovation processes, and then you've got a large number of companies wanting to submit their innovation ideas to water companies. And what I still think there needs to be done is some work in terms of matching the expectations, the needs of the water companies with the expectations of the supply chain. So what we'd like to do is help the water companies funnel those innovations and help to meet the expectations of the supply chain, who sometimes say that they are frustrated because they try and contact water companies. They don't feel that they have the ability to get their innovations in front of water companies, and if they're trialed, they don't always get timely feedback. So what we'd like to do is support water companies in their innovation journeys and help the supply chain to feed in their innovations as effectively as possible. We're also looking at procurement practices. So some of the supply chain are saying that there are multiple supply registrations and bespoke contracts which add to the workload. So what they're trying to do is find ways to work more effectively with water companies to look at what we can do to better improve current procurement practices. And I'll come on to what British Water is doing on that in a few moments. And then there's also terms and conditions. So some of the supply chain companies are saying that some of the risk is being passed down along the supply chain, and we want to evaluate whether that is the case and what we can do to work with water companies to make the supply chain and the supply community much more efficient and resilient for the future. Next slide, please. So just sort of looking at some of the sort of key challenges, and some of them Lee's already mentioned. So we're sort of seeing that we're squeezing AMP7 into 3 years that we have remaining, or just over 3 years we have remaining of AMP7. So therefore, we may have the capability, but do we really have the capacity to deliver that? And so that's something that we're going to be exploring, and that's something I'd love to hear your feedback on during the Q&A. Some of the contractors and other companies are saying that they are busy quoting, but they're seeing limited work come through. And again, we just want to see if that's the case, because there's lots of work that's going to need to be delivered in AMP7, and we want to make sure that we have a sector able to deliver. We're also looking at what that impact, if there's a delay, what that impact is then going to have on the delivery of AMP8. And obviously we're feeding into PR24, which is currently being worked on by Ofwat. One of the other things that we're hearing is that there are issues around cost of labour and materials. So we have a survey that's going to be going out soon, which is going to be asking the supply chain, water companies and others, whether they're experiencing an increase in labour costs and materials, and whether these are COVID related, Brexit related, or related to anything else, or competition from other sectors. Because what we want to do is make sure that the water sector is as attractive a sector to work in as possible, because it's a fantastic sector to work in. So what British Water has recently done is established a supply chain task force. Can you get to the next slide, please, Luke? So what that supply chain task force is, it's a task force looking at 3 particular task and finish projects. So what we're looking at is cyclicality, procurement, terms and conditions, and innovation. So cyclicality, we're looking at the ongoing effect of the AMP cycle, so the 5-year peaks and troughs, and seeing whether we can come up with any recommendations to reflect the impact it's having on the supply chain, people leaving the sector, then having to come back, having to compete with other sectors to keep those staff and attract them back into the sector, and how that could negatively impact AMP7 and beyond. So we'd like to come up with some recommendations that would help the supply community to deliver AMP7 and future projects. We're also looking at procurement and terms and conditions, so that I mentioned as previously on my other slide about some of the challenges around multiple supplier registrations and contracts. So again, we're going to come up with some recommendations with water companies that we have involved, supporting our supply chain task force on an expert panel. Also, we're going to be looking at innovation. And in innovation, we're going to look at 3 particular things. We're going to look at the regulation and legislation landscape. So seeing what the Drinking Water Inspectorate, DEFRA, the Environment Agency are doing with regards to driving innovation. And then we're going to map out funding opportunities and look at the lack of testing facilities which are available to demonstrate regulatory compliance, and see what we can do to build up testing facilities and to make recommendations in those areas. Next slide, please. So what I want to look at now is the future. So there's a lot going on in the sector, great opportunities. There are challenges, as I've highlighted, but there are real opportunities to make changes and to transform the sector for the better. So there's a 2050 water innovation strategy, which Lee highlighted in one of his slides. I'd recommend you have a look at that. In that strategy, there are key themes that the water companies have agreed to work on that will help to drive innovation in their focus for the future up to 2050, and those are key and really good indicators as to what they're going to be focusing on and where the opportunities lie in the future. There's also a new vision for the sector that's been established, and that will link in with the innovation strategy. If you go to the Water UK sector, Water UK's website, look at their campaign section, you'll see the vision document there. Again, have a look at that and see where the vision is taking the sector for the future, and feed in ideas when you can. There's also discussions around a centre of excellence, and the hope is that the centre of excellence will start to kick in from autumn this year. That will help to bring and support the supply chain much closer together in collaboration with water companies, and really help to sort of drive innovation in the sector. Then we have Ofwat's Innovation in Water Challenge. So the first challenge took place. We now have the Breakthrough Challenge that is going on, and then there's going to be a second round of the Innovation in Water Challenge, and then the second round of the Breakthrough Challenge. Do have a look at the Ofwat website with regards to those innovation opportunities, and do work with the water companies and attend the brokerage events once they are live to work collaboratively with them. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, British Water is a not-for-profit trade association with 200 members. We help our companies in 3 core areas, the UK, technical and international areas, and we deliver those through 3 forums. Under the UK forum, we organise monthly water company liaison meetings. So we organise meetings with each of the water companies, and we'll be organising meetings with other key clients in the UK to support the supply chain. We have the supply chain task force, and if you'd like to support that initiative and feed in any responses or feedback, feel free to get in touch with me. What we're working on with water companies is to help to provide clarity on any project delays as a result of COVID impacts, and also just to help give that sort of visibility of projects coming through. And then also we'll be issuing supply chain surveys, and the next one will be on the cost of materials and labour. Next slide, please. So that's my email address. Feel free to get in touch. I hope you don't mind. I just want to highlight that we have an insight briefing next week where we have Angela Makoska, the head of innovation at Northumbrian Water. She's going to be talking about innovation and sharing how companies can work with Northumbrian on the Innovation Festival that's coming up. It's a free event. It's next Friday. So if you'd like to attend and register, just feel free to go to the British Water website. So do work closely with ourselves and with Enterprise Island, as we're here to help. We think it's a fantastic sector to work in. We're obviously aware of the challenges, but we know that we can work through them to support the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila. We actually just have some questions that have come through. If we can just pop through a few, if that's all right with you.
Yep.
So the first one here is just talking about that capacity problem that you had mentioned. And it's just asking how, in your view, I suppose, how can the sector work towards solving that problem, and what role do supply chain companies and SMEs have to play in that?
Yeah, I think,
Luke, can I just jump in? That's
Yep.
probably going to be a big question for the panel forum. So should we let Lila answer that along with the other people in the panel section?
yeah, good point, Lee.
Yeah, perfect. And then just more here. You mentioned a kind of lack of visibility of projects. What advice would you give to, I suppose, new entrants into the sector who might struggle with that visibility of projects? And I suppose, how can they overcome this hurdle?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing problem. I think if you're already engaged with the water companies, obviously you'll know what's going on, but if you're new, it can be a challenge. And then one of the things that we do at British Water is we organise these monthly water company liaison meetings. Our next one actually is with Severn Trent next week. And so that's where a team from Severn Trent give an update on their capital delivery projects, asset management projects, the challenges that they're trying to address, the solutions that they're looking for, their spend. It introduces you to the team responsible for procurement. So it's a thorough hour and a 45-minute briefing. And so I recommend that companies get involved in those and join those. We're seeing about 50 to 100 companies attend those. So they're really, really good meetings. Plus we keep them open in the sense that you can then connect with people on the back end of the call. So we always keep the chat open. So then you can identify people from different tier 1s, tier 2s on the call, potential people that you can partner with, so you can message people and connect. So we really find those useful. Also, I mentioned the insight briefings that we organise. So we've got Northumbrian presenting next week. These insight briefings are held once a month. Again, they're a really useful tool. If you become a member of British Water, all of the insight briefing recordings and all the recordings and presentations from the water company liaison meetings are available for members on the website completely free of charge for viewing any time. So that's one of the ways that I would suggest that people get engaged, find out what the water companies are doing. But really what you need to do is build relationships. You've got to find out what their opportunities are, what their key focus areas are, and just build those relationships through various different platforms. That's one of the things that British Water does and Enterprise Island does.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lila. I suppose that's it for now in the interest of timing. We'll head on to Matt's presentation. Thanks for that, Lila. It was great to hear your insights. So I will give the floor to you then, Matt.
Morning, folks. So thanks for that. So great intro in terms of, I guess I'm the advert. So you get 10 minutes with me today, and then if I'm any good, you'll all register for our session next week and get the real detail and get the hour 45 version. So that's brilliant. So my name's Matt Lewis. Thank you so much for inviting me along this morning. So I work in the asset information and innovation. I'm going to turn off my camera so you get the full slide. We'll try that. Okay. At Severn Trent, and we cover Hafran Dyfrdwy as well. So sorry for my Welsh if there are any Welsh speakers on board this morning. So my role at Severn Trent is all about delivery, and my team are accountable for trialing new technologies and understanding the value that they could bring into our organisation. So this includes a range of technology levels. So we start out at the research phase and we work with universities and we collaborate at that end, but we also are accountable for defining some of those technical specifications that will go into our tender process right at the far end in order for us to bring in new technologies to our world. So it's worth mentioning, we've already mentioned it a few times, so Severn Trent's a monopoly supplier, so our customers don't have a choice of whether they can use us or not. Oh, apologies for that. So customers don't have a choice of whether they can use us or not. So what does this mean? So it means that we have to follow some rules because we have a dominant position in the market and we can't afford to abuse that position, and we need to make sure that we're spending our customers' money wisely. So this can mean that dealing with us comes with some challenges. So it's worth understanding that, and it's worth knowing that we are not a completely commercial entity in terms of the market that we go out to. So we have to follow rules and regulations that apply to our monopoly position. So just quickly, as you're probably already aware, so Severn Trent's the second biggest UK water company. Our job is to treat and deliver potable water and take away waste and then treat that and return it to the environment. And we do that for around about 4.5 million customers, connected properties, should I say, rather than customers, probably nearer 10 million customers. We're located right in the middle of England, and I have mentioned before, Severn Trent PLC has 2 water companies, so we're also represent Hafren Dyfrdwy, and they cover parts of Wales based around the Wrexham area. So it's worth just saying before I move on to my first slide that our purpose as a company, which really resonates with myself and the staff in Severn Trent, so our purpose is to taking care of one of life's essentials. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide then. So I've been asked to talk to you this morning about the challenges Severn Trent has in AMP7 and leading into PR24. So clearly as a utility business, we have a reasonably long asset life. So we look at pipes in the floor that lasting 150 years plus, and assets mostly that we're putting in new to last 50 years plus. So we're obviously interested in a much longer term than 2025, and our innovation process hopefully reflects this. So for the sake of the slide, so there's 3 boxes right at the top of the slide, and this is our 3 baskets, if you like, of work that we try and fit everything into. So our first one is delivering our customer commitments. So that's all about the here and now. So anything that could help us deliver our commitments, our performance commitments today, tomorrow, and through to 2025. So that's what we're interested in delivering our customer commitments. The second box, the one in the middle, is about preparing for AMP8 and beyond. And this is all about testing the technologies today and tomorrow that will invest in our business plan in PR24, and look to obviously bring improvements and bake into our business plan for AMP8 and beyond. So preparing for AMP8 and beyond is all about that sort of stuff. And then the kind of the wraparound is our transition to circularity. So we've already talked a little bit this morning about carbon and growth within the water sector. And this for us is all about our intention. Wouldn't it be great if a water company was free, at least for domestic supply, and water companies generated income from recovering materials from waste, and doing the stuff that enhances the environment? So one man's waste is another man's fortune, has been said before, and our circularity transition to circularity is all about that new markets and where we can collect resources and reuse. So all our activities fall into one of the baskets above. So it's worth knowing that if you want to work with us. And we aim to balance our portfolio to have the right amount of focus on each of these. So it's very easy for us to get laser focused on the here and now and not spend enough time on what's coming around the corner. And ultimately being proactive will give our customers the best outcome in the long term. So the picture in the middle of the slide illustrates the process that we follow to help us solve the 3 commitments that I talked about at the top. So once we've published our needs on the left-hand side, then we're looking for solutions. So these might be digital, data service, physical, technology, science-based solutions. So whatever category the solution falls into, we're really seeking to understand 3 main things, and they are how viable that solution is. So is it affordable to us and our customers in the short, medium and long term? So desirability, will our customers want it? Will our business business want it, and how easy, how desirable is that solution, and then one, how feasible is it? So how well does it solve the problem that we're trying to solve, and how soon can we implement that? So when we're confident that we've identified a solution that is viable at scale, desirable to our business and our customers, and feasible within the time frame that we require to progress, at this point we may choose to offset our risk by looking at some options to fund. And Severn Trent has a number of funded projects running at the moment. So we've got some projects running that are Horizon 2020 funded through the Rewaste programme. We've got a number of projects running with Innovate UK, and we also have 2 Ofwat funded bids. So from the Innovation in Water Challenge from round 1, we have 1 Severn Trent bid and 1 Hafren Dyfrdwy bid. And these are around dark fibre for leakage investigation, which is the Hafren Dyfrdwy. So we're investigating to understand if existing fibre networks like broadband, etc. in the floor can actually be used to detect leaks on the pipes that are reasonably close to them. And we're partnering in that one with a company called Focus Sensors and Costain. And we're also partnering with a number of water companies, so Welsh Water and Portsmouth Water, and it's been brilliant for us to be able to do that. The second project that we've got running is a behavioural science project, and it's all about supporting customers in vulnerable circumstances, and we're really chuffed to be leading on this project. It's all about influencing how customers can engage with us and other water companies better, especially during periods of stress, so during operational events and things like that. And we're really pleased to be partnering with the Consumer Council for Water on this one. And Thames Water and South East Water are also showing a strong interest in partnering with us, as well as supporting organisations of Octopus Energy and United Utilities. So it's great that we're managing to get involved and lead a couple of projects, but Severn Trent's also showing a strong interest in supporting a number of other projects that have come out of round 1 of the Ofwat fund bids. So these are mainly to do with AI for sewer defects analysis, so industrial symbiosis, and the Water UK sector of Centre of Excellence, which has already been mentioned a couple of times this morning. So we're hoping to get some great things out of that moving forward. So if you want to move on to the next slide. So Severn Trent kind of knows that we get our best outcomes when we work with our supply chain partners on solutions that are most critical and our well-defined challenges. So this slide really sets out our process in terms of understanding what matters to us as a business, prioritizing that in a way that we know that we're tackling our biggest challenges that are going to offer us our biggest benefits first. And then understanding how we deliver those. So we have a small team of architects and business experts who are deconstructing all of our business drivers. So understanding those biggest priorities, probably from our final determination, but also moving into AMP8 and beyond, and understanding what's going to have the most and the highest impact of the problems. So our process then validates these challenges, and we try and look outside of our business as well, so to cross-sector experts in order to help us to do that. And then finally, our innovation needs are published. And I guess this is where you guys and girls and companies will be interested in working with us. And we share these with potential collaborators. So basically, we're doing some of the legwork up front, hopefully, to help us to reach out to folks like you in order to provide you with the information that you need in order to share with us your products in the way that you think they can add most value to us. So if you want to go on to slide 4, next one. Okay, so this is just a bit of a slide just to demonstrate how we go about understanding potential solutions and looking for solutions to some of our problems and some of the companies that we work with. So Severn Trent is a founder member of the World Water Innovation Fund that gives us great access to 14 other World Water Innovation Fund members from across the globe. And really is eye-opening in terms of some of the drivers out externally to the UK water industry. So it's a great opportunity for us to do that. We also have scouting partnerships. We look to work with university in terms of gathering the information that they're great at and helping them to help us to understand what the problems of the future might be. So if we scooch on to the next slide. So we're always looking for new forms and new ways of working in beneficial partnerships. So we're working hard to be a better partner and a better collaborator. So working in the water sector isn't always easy. And we would welcome feedback from companies regarding how we might go about becoming their partner of choice. So really this slide is sort of an examples of some of the things that we're doing today in terms of some of the companies that we've got working with and alongside us in order to give you an idea of some of the things that we're working on. So if you flip on to the next slide. Right, and last but not least, a partnership slide. So we have a team at Severn Trent that look at our external partnerships, and down here are a number of those partners that we're already working with. And then it was just worth a quick mention to also say that we have an internal technical expertise. So we have some great things going on inside of Severn Trent, trying to get the best ideas out of our employees. So we have a Challenge Cup event that goes out, and we've generated hundreds of ideas from our staff that have resulted in us taking on research projects or working with companies in order to solve the problems of the employees on the ground upwards. We're also quite lucky to have a strong community of practice. So we have 52 communities of practice that meet regularly and talk about all the different aspects of water and wastewater and working in Severn Trent. So just worth mentioning the fact that we like to think we can be an expert client and really articulate our problems well. And this is some of the ways that we manage to do that. So if you go on to the next slide. Thank you, Luke. So last but not least, I guess this is how you get in touch with us. So the best way for us is if you go to our website, and on the website, you'll find an innovation section within that website. And within there, we set up a form. So it's a bit like a Microsoft Forms, and it should talk you through in terms of what I talked about earlier on, in terms of the baskets of work that we're looking at, and how hopefully help you to articulate to us where your product or your supply would add most value to Severn Trent, certainly from an innovation perspective. So that's how we'd like you to get in touch with us, and that really help us to help you, if you like. So if we go on to the next slide, so the next number of slides are just about our innovation activity. So I'm not sure how long I've got left, but if you just want to flick through the slides, Luke. So the next one, I won't go into any detail at all on these. I'm sure we're going to share them afterwards, and you can ask any questions. So these are just the themes of Ofwat and the technologies that we've currently got going on in terms of what we're trialing within these slides. And the last one, I think, fabulous. So this is the one just talking about, I won't play the video, but you can find it online. So have a look on YouTube. So for our Resource Recovery and Innovation Centre, so one of the questions earlier on was test sites. So my team runs a test site in Redditch. So we have an £8 million wastewater pad. So we can trial any end-to-end wastewater treatment process from inlet through to tertiary treatment. And we have a number of activities going on that pad at the moment. The latest one is an anaerobic membrane bioreactor, which is the first scale bioreactor in the Northern Hemisphere. And we turned it on this week, so just 2 days ago. And we're hoping that gives us some fabulous results in terms of being able to treat waste in a more energy efficient way. I think that's about me done. I haven't covered anything on our green recovery, of which we were very successful. So out of the large number at the beginning, I think Severn Trent secured around about 565 million of that green recovery fund. And it's all about decarbonising water for us, water resources, getting to net zero. It's all about taking care of supply pipes, removing the lead and the leakage risk. It's about using smart meters and trying to drive down that per capita consumption. improving bathing water rivers. So we're trying to get to swimming water standard for some of the rivers within our region, accelerating our environmental plans, so bringing those forward 5 years. And last but not least, we're trying to create a flood resilient network. So we're going to build a test bed that will align us to our 2050 targets. So I think that's me more than done. I probably took far too long. Sorry, Luke.
Thanks,
No,
Mark.
you're fine.
That was good. That was great. I just have one question before we go on to the panel thing. Are you aware of what the other water companies have in terms of their portals similar to Severn Trent? Do they have similar access portals that you have? So obviously that the people on the call can follow similar routes with the other water companies.
So I would very much doubt we're unique, but I think it's probably a better question for Lila than myself, because I'm obviously not trawling their websites in order to work with them more closely. So I don't have a product that I can sell. But I would very much expect that certainly all the big water companies will have a detailed explanation of their challenges within their websites and access through into their innovation teams via that method. And I think part of the great thing about the new Ofwat fund is the fact that it's creating an environment where water companies can collaborate much closer with each other as well. So we did some of that in terms of the World Water Innovation Fund and for worldwide, but I think the Ofwat fund is now making a great place where water companies can share some of the good things they're already doing with each other, and help suppliers work with more than one water company at the same time.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. Can I ask Lila and Paul and Mike to put their cameras on, please, and their microphones as well? That would be useful. And can we switch the presentation off, Luke?
Yeah, perfect. So we'll head on to the panel discussion now. So thanks for that, Matt. I'll feed through any questions, and if we can't get through them all, I'll pass them to the speakers afterwards. Okay. Thanks, Mill. I'll leave you kick off.
Thank you. So first thing, can I ask Paul to introduce himself so everyone knows who he is?
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Paul Gardner. I'm the Managing Director of Glanagua in the UK. So Glanagua are a design, build and operate contractor, process mica and civils capability. And we're currently working on AMP7 frameworks as Tier 1 with Yorkshire Water, with Thames Water. We're finishing off some projects with Affinity Water at the moment, and we're supporting others on their AMP projects with Severn Trent, and we're placed as well on Northern Irish Water's capital programme over the next 5 years as well. So that's me. Thanks, Lee.
Mike.
Hello everyone, Mike Froom. I'm Business Development Director for a company called T-Tech Process Solutions. T-Tech Process Solutions is a Tier 2 water wastewater treatment process provider and technology provider. We also manufacture MCC panels and do system integration, and all that is supported by in-house off-site manufacture and digital engineering services. T-Tech Process Solutions was established at the back end of last year. It's a Trant Group company. Trant Engineering Limited are a Tier 1 contractor in the municipal water market. So they're a Tier 1 contractor for the likes of Southern Water, Wessex, but have been active with most water companies. Just touching on Matt's presentation, we're active with the anaerobic MBR in Spurnell as well, providing the membranes, the UF membranes for that part. So we touch on a number of areas. Trant are also involved in oil and gas, energy, and the international market as well.
Thanks, Mike. I'll just quickly jump to Lila just to answer the point that Matt raised. Are you aware that the other water companies than Severn Trent have access portals for innovations, etc., and that the members would be able to access those portals?
Yes, they do. And as Matt said, that we've definitely seen a step change in the way that water companies have really improved their portals for supply chain to engage with them on innovation. So as a result of the Ofwat Innovation Fund, lots of water companies have really beefed up their websites, provided additional information, the key challenges that they're trying to address, the solutions that they're looking for, and then there's often an email address or some kind of funnel system that they have in place to sort of filter through the innovation. So definitely, if you go to the search for innovation in the water company's name, you should be able to come to those email addresses and portals quite easily.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lila. Thanks for that. So just for everybody on the call, officially we're due to finish at 11. We're going to run on for 15 or 20 minutes because I don't want these guys to get away without having some questions to answer for you lot. So the first question is to everybody, and feel free to jump in and let Paul and Mike know me quite well. So if you don't jump in, I'll just pick somebody to answer it. So you're better off getting in fast. But remember when you're at school and you had to volunteer, get in first and then you get the best of it is what I would suggest. So the first question to everybody is, and we touched on it in the presentations, is there sufficient capacity in the water supply chain to deliver AMP7? And if the answer is no, which I suspect the answer is yes, the real question is, what should the collective we do about it?
Well, if you're happy, Mike, I might take that first question.
Yeah.
I think there definitely are concerns, Lee, about the capacity in a number of areas. I won't touch all of them, but I think certainly a few of them that where I see issues are, all the water companies have a significant P removal program, so phosphorus removal program, and I think they all have, for example, framework suppliers for dosing equipment. And I think that given the fact that the delivery of these programs are slightly compressed now from 5 years to effectively 3 years, that you're going to see a bottleneck in supply of chemical dosing equipment, for example. So I think that's something that I'm very acutely aware of. I think there's limitations with the existing framework suppliers potentially. I think that they serve, a lot of these companies serve the same the same water companies, but they're talking to them on an individual basis, maybe not as there's no one basically acting on behalf of the industry who understands the overall procurement across the industry. So I think there's potentially a bottleneck there, which obviously means there's a potential opportunity there. I think in the short term, there's obviously, we've got some issues with steel and rebar supply and even with pipe work. So they're more short-term issues. Longer term then, I think in terms of resource, certainly commissioning resource is going to be a struggle. A lot of projects have shifted to the right. And to save on some of the challenges from the regulator, to save on OPEX costs as well. A lot of the projects are commissioning at the same time towards the end of the AMP cycle, which is what we're finding, which is going to, across the board, it's going to cause a shortage in commissioning resource. So I think that's another potential opportunity as well. So there are just a couple of practical examples, but I don't know, I'm sure there's others that some of the panels can maybe suggest as well.
Mike?
So I guess jumping in from a water company perspective, what a great problem to solve, and what a great time in terms of the massive amount of talent that are available at the moment to attract new people into the water sector. And I think certainly from a Severn Trent viewpoint, we've committed to spending a lot of money in terms of our green recovery program over the next 4 years, and we will definitely be encouraging our supply chain partners to help us deliver that in the short, medium and long term, and creating somewhere in the region of about 2,500 jobs is super important to us across the region that we supply, and supporting our customers. And I think so it is a challenge, and it will always be a challenge. However, it's a great challenge for us to get into, and being in the water industry for 20 years myself, and kind of falling in as I came out of school, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I think that there are so much talent out there at the moment. We're supporting the Kickstarter program in terms of getting young people into work that have never had jobs before. I think we're currently around about 300 of those new people, bringing them in and giving them opportunities to work at Severn Trent, certainly for the next 6 months, and hopefully a lot of them will work there beyond that. And I think our ambition is to do about 500 of those. So it's, for me, the future is bright, and I think the water industry, like we said before, is kind of recession proof. So we're always going to need water and waste, and it's for us to make sure that we attract the best talent. And I think we also have the credentials in terms of being environmentally savvy, and we are employers of choice for a lot of people. So that's the jobs for us to kind of make sure that we are aligned to what the youth of today and the best talent want to do.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I can reiterate a little of what Paul said, as he highlighted. The WINIT programme is a large proportion of the current AMP spend profile, and it was always going to be concertinaed a little bit into December 24 regulation dates, apart from the early start schemes. Some water companies have advanced some of those later schemes because this has been on the horizon for some time. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect with the green recovery. It would have been nice to have the green recovery a little bit earlier, because a lot of the default position on achieving the consent standards for P removal are defaulting to tertiary treatment, chemical dosing, which is not really a long-term sustainable solution. But it's the water companies, I think, are a little bit between a rock and a hard place. They have consent standards to meet, so it's an easy bolt-on solution. I think what we're seeing is emerging technology and more natural resource solutions to this problem. So, yeah, things like anaerobic processors, algal processors, things like our T-site process, which is a biological phosphorus removal process, are coming through. But it would have been nice to have that wave of new technology coming through a little bit earlier. And I know we'll perhaps talk about net zero later on as well, but I think that would have helped. I think all of that and the default solution is what's causing some of the capacity issue in the supply chain. All the water companies want a similar default solution where it's easy to put that tertiary solution on. Picking up on your point, Matt, in terms of talent and new people to the sector, I know Lila will echo this. This has been a long-term concern for British Water and British Water's members, and work's been done in the past about the impact of this cyclic nature of regulation in the water sector, and how many people actually get lost each time there's a regulatory cycle and a downturn in investment in the first year and potentially a drop off in the last year. Now that has improved with AMP6 and AMP7. It's improved with rollover of certain delivery partners, but we're not there yet. And I echo your sentiment, Matt, entirely. It would be great to get more young people interested and engaged in our sector. It is a diverse sector. It's an interesting sector. As you said, Lee, COVID has shown us that it's quite a resilient sector in terms of it is regulated spend, so it's not as susceptible to external factors. But I think the solution is in our own hands in terms of flattening those AMP delivery cycles and making it a long-term attractive industry for new talent.
Lila, what's the view of the supply chain?
Well, I endorse and support all of the comments, and in fact, I went to Severn Trent's Academy when you opened it up, which was very nice of you to invite me, and I met some of your Kickstarters. I can see the fantastic work that you and your team are doing. I think what British Water and the supply community can do is identify what the problems are with regards to capacity, and that's one of the things that we're doing on our supply chain task force. And we also have, as I mentioned, an expert panel who are supporting that group in the background. So we've got the likes of Mark Froggatt from Anglian and Sean Robinson from Welsh Water. So we've got different sort of contacts working on that. And one of the key things that we want to do is identify what the particular problems are. So, for example, one of the things I've heard from one of the water companies is they'll go to visit a particular company, and then they'll see they've got a pallet of chemical dosing for one particular water company, and then they've got a different pallet for another water company, but completely different, sort of slightly tweaked solution. And he was saying that's completely inefficient. So these are the sorts of things that British Water is currently discussing with water company contacts. What are the sort of things that we need to do to address the particular challenges that are really going to hamper the delivery of AMP7 and beyond in terms of capacity, because we do have the capability. And I think people are working in the background to really bring in new talent and to make the sector more attractive. But I think highlighting the issues, working together to come up with recommendations will really bring about a step change.
Thanks, Lila. I guess my overall comment is I absolutely believe we need some joined up thinking from the top to the bottom. The sector is a lot closer working together than it's ever been, but I still think there's massive gaps between the PLCs, the tier ones, the tier twos, gaps that just need to close to make it much more one industry. And hopefully this challenge that will come across in years 3 and 4 and probably beyond into AMP8 will help to close those gaps. Next question really for Mike and Paul, you know, as tier ones and tier 2 contractors having, you know, work in the sector, a lot of the people on this call will be interested in finding out is what support do you guys need in your businesses, and how do the people that are on this call make the support that they have and the capability and the capacity that they have available to you guys? How do you see what getting your hands on what they've got as helping you do what you need to do for the next 3, 4, 5, even 10 years?
Do you want me to go first on that one, Paul?
Yeah,
I can talk from 2 perspectives. Obviously, the Trant Group as a tier 1 contractor, it's a case of really delivering that program. So whatever is out there in terms of resource capacity, ideas to help deliver the program efficiently. Resources are an issue, so we're going to see that intensify over the next couple of years. I think we've got a number of open vacancies at the moment, so support from other strategic delivery partners would be pushing at an open door. From TTEC Process Solutions point of view, we recognise that there isn't one technology that fits all applications. So part of my remit is very much about broadening that technology portfolio and providing a platform for strategic relationships with other technology providers and service providers. And we've done that in a couple of places already, where we have strategic partners where perhaps some process technology comes from another company and perhaps in another country, but we can, with the capability in our facilities in Southampton, we can look at putting that into a standard package DFMA approach to deliver to the water companies. That gives the water companies the flexibility in terms of not having stranded assets in the future. It gives flexibility in terms of reduced timescales on site, which everyone is driving towards. So there's an open invite there to make contact with myself if you want a strategic partner in the UK in terms of some of those technologies and services. We're very happy to have those conversations.
I'm going to focus your question a bit tighter, Paul. What do the people on this call need? How do they get their capabilities and technologies in front of you and your counterparts as tier 1 contractors?
Well, firstly, I think, you know, certainly I'd be more than happy to for anyone to get in touch with me directly. Our procurement and you know, outline design is typically done and centralised in Ireland. So which is obviously useful for the people on the call, you know, who are looking to export. You know, I can make those details available to you know, following this call. But I think just in terms of the services and what we're looking for, you know, it's very similar to Mike. Of course, we're in a very similar space. I would echo that of the DFMA approach. That's something that we've obviously adopted, and we have some of our own DFMA capability, but not entirely, and we will need support on that. I think Yorkshire have made a very positive step in actually having DFMA, so that's designed for manufacture assembly, so that's, you know, off-site construction and prefabrication. That's their default. You have to make a business case not to have a DFMA solution. So I think that's a very, very positive step. So there's if there's ways that you can support us on our program of works, that's definitely something I'd be interested to speak to people who have that capability. The other thing, as I said before, one of the things that we're very keen on doing is, where possible, challenging the use of framework suppliers. If we think there's value elsewhere, that's something we push to do, and potentially conventional or outline designs or asset standards. So I think we will be quite a good avenue and to approach if you have an alternative, whether it be a process or technology. That's something that we'd be very, very interested in. We're all aware of what the key drivers are for AMP7. AMP8 will be a different thing. There'll be things like emerging pollutants and microplastics and things like that. So there are different issues that we'll be looking at. We're already engaged actually with British Water on that. So I encourage you as well, if you have technologies like that, or if you have engaging with British Water is a really, really positive step, because that's what we've done. We're actually chairing a micropollutant group and a forum which gets us engaged with the wider market, the wider water companies, which is fantastic.
Thanks,
so
Paul.
I think that's probably sums our position really in terms of
I like the word challenge, because as far as I'm concerned, challenging the status quo is innovation. And pushing the water companies to do things differently and to get out of their comfort zone is something that we in the supply chain absolutely have to do, because they've been sat in their comfort zone for 30 years and they need to get out of it. So I really like that, and I think anybody on the call who believes that they have technologies and capabilities that can challenge those asset standards, then get them in the frame. I suppose a question for Matt, which is specific to the Ofwat Partnership Fund. Lots of people on this call potentially have capabilities and technologies that they'd like to get into that game. How do they bring those ideas to Severn Trent and Severn Trent's brothers and sisters in the marketplace, so actually to allow them to get them to Ofwat's table? How do they do this? What do they have to do?
So I think the Centre of Excellence will cover some of this in terms of being a focal point for suppliers to be able to reach out to multiple water companies at the same time. And as part of the coming up with the Centre of Excellence idea, Severn Trent ran some sprint type events, and I definitely attended a number of them, and they were great. They were kind of short pitches from suppliers that had multiple water companies listening, with some contact details afterwards, and then we could reach out. I guess in the meantime, if you wanted to get in touch with Severn Trent, or as Lila said, then there are a number of water companies with the same process. Our website is the absolute easiest. You can log onto the website, find the innovation page, and you get through directly into an inbox that's looked at daily by folks within our team that will look at your innovation and get back to you in terms of we think this is great and we'd love to talk to you more about this, or this doesn't align to our expectations at the moment. We're prioritizing these things. We've logged your details and it might be something that interests us at a later date. So that's kind of that's the easy way.
Thanks, Matt. So just one final question. We're due to finish around 11:15, 11:20, and this is a question for everybody, so we'll come to you in turn. We've all got a role to play in delivering on the sustainability and the environmental protection agenda that the sector is committed to, the PLCs have committed to. A lot of the big tier 1 contractors have made their personal commitments. Just give me two things that you think would be essential for the supply chain to be clear on when it comes to contributing to those 2030 sustainability targets. Happy to take volunteers to go first.
Well, I think I'm trying to think of a second one, but I have one, Lee. So maybe start with that one, and something might come to mind. But I think it's understanding how it's measured, how carbon is measured. That's the key. I know it's a very fundamental thing, but I think that's something that's it needs to be understood by the supply chain and standardized, so we're all singing the same hymn sheet, and we understand how we're tracking against our targets. So I think that's, and we're still on our journey with that, and the different companies that we're engaged with measure slightly differently as well. So I think that's something that I think is important to get appreciated.
How essential is an individual business knowing its own carbon footprint in that journey?
Well, to be honest with you, have I seen that play out in the supply chain, or in terms of procurement, and in terms of not necessarily. I haven't seen that as probably, and that's something that I was going to maybe say that would need to be addressed. It needs to start right at procurement. I think we are seeing in some of the question about the specific project, about or the plant that's being proposed as a design build contract. You're seeing, but how the carbon impact of this plant, and you'll have more emphasis on TOTEX as well. But how that follows through to actually, are you held against that? Will we see, we have performance guarantees on projects for water quality. Will we start seeing in the future performance guarantees and consents on emissions that you're actually held to, and have penalties against if you don't achieve them? That's something that I can
speak from personal knowledge. That's an absolute requirement for the new Scottish water frameworks that just put in place. They asked every tendering business to define their own carbon footprint and to make commitments to improve it by 2025.
Yeah, well, that's really good. That's really positive. Yeah.
So from a water company point of view,
yeah.
Each of my team now, who runs all of the innovation projects within Severn Trent, they each have a personal objective that is to make conscious decisions around the carbon life of the assets that they're proposing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we wouldn't bring something in, but it would be a harder decision if it was a chunk of carbon that we were adding to the pile, if you like, in terms of offsetting. So certainly from our point of view, I guess the biggies we've already set out to, so net zero by 2030, and part of that is fully electric or green fuel fleet. So that's big for us, and 100% renewable energy. So we're 50% in of kind of providing our own energy through food waste, hydro, solar and wind mostly, but we're absolutely up for being a sustainable company in terms of producing our own energy. It's a massive bill for us, tens of millions of pounds a year. It's obviously the water sector is a big consumer of energy, and being sustainable in that space is massive for us.
Those commitments of electric vehicles and green electricity are commitments that everybody can make, aren't they?
They are, yeah. I didn't quite hear the end of it, and we're kind of going that one step further in terms of scope 3 emissions in electric vehicles, and we're encouraging employees to buy electric vehicles, and the business is helping through the government funding of that as well. So we've got a great scheme to start to get our travel to and from our bases of work much greener as well.
So a question that's come out from the floor, and I'll just throw to you, Matt, before we go to Lila, is it better to demonstrate innovative technologies directly to you as a water company or to tier 1 contractors?
I would say both routes are equally good, and it depends upon where you. So we in Severn Trent have a reasonable sized innovation team. We have the ability to test products, so I would definitely say come to us. If you happen to come through us via a supply chain partner, they're supporting you, and that's the method that we would install, then clearly that is equally a good route. So either or.
So I'm going to give you the last bit of the floor, Lila. What's British Water's view on sustainability 2020 targets, and what all the supply chain can do to help us?
Sorry, there's quite a lot of background noise.
Can everybody turn your mics off?
I'm not sure where it's coming from. So I couldn't really hear you that clearly, Lee.
Sorry, I said I was going to leave the last bit to you. Is what's British Water's view on delivering those 2030 sustainability targets, and what the supply chain has to do to help us deliver on them as a sector?
Okay, so I think it sort of comes back to some of the points that I've already mentioned earlier, and some of the key points we've been mentioning. I think collaboration is key. As many people have said, I've never seen such willingness to collaborate as now in the sector, which is absolutely fantastic. So I think we need to keep talking. We need to sort of join up what we're working on and what we're focusing on. We need to continue with the visibility. So we need greater visibility as to how companies are going about achieving those targets. And I do know that the water companies are actually going to be launching their own plans, their own net zero plans. So that's something that's coming out, I think, within the next month or so. And so we're going to be looking closely at that and how the supply chain can support those initiatives. So I think it's identifying what the water companies are looking at, what they're trying to achieve, and then seeing what solutions and technologies the supply chain has, and sort of bring us much closer together to collaborate to achieve those goals.
Thanks, Lila, and a specific thank you to Matt, Mike, and Paul for answering the questions as raised. As we've all said, our contact details will be circulated post. Oh, and as I say it, up they come. And I'll just, in that case, I'll hand back to Luke if he can jump on and take control. And I will say thank you to everybody and hopefully speak to you all soon.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks a million, Lee, and thanks a million to all the speakers for joining us today. It was great to get your insight into some issues across the sector. So Enterprise Ireland and British Water contact details are on screen. If you'd like any info, feel free to reach out. As well as that, also follow our LinkedIn's or our Twitters. So they're of the same name, and you can find info on there or on our website. So with that, I just want to say thanks a million for sticking with us, and thanks a million for joining us today. And enjoy the rest of your Friday and your weekend. Have a good day, all. See you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.